2020 was a year full of fears. We were governed, controlled, pushed around by our fears way more than I think most of us like to admit. We might not have even been aware of how scared we were of certain things until the media was pushing things strong enough, or there was enough talk about sickness, disease, and elections and everything else that really got into our system, and then anxiety gave birth to all this worry and fear that overtook us. That's normal. It's normal to be afraid. It's normal to get worried. It's normal to be filled even with anxiety as the trials of life bear down upon us. The question is, where do we go in our trial? Where do we go in our pain? Psalm 119, verse 25, we have a man who is writing to us who is in the throes of a life-threatening condition, probably much worse than what most of us experienced in 2020. He uses this expression here to start out in verse 25, "My soul cleaves to the dust." He realizes that what he is experiencing is a life-threatening condition. Sometimes these life-threatening conditions are imagined rather than real. My understanding of the psalmist is that this is probably a very real situation. Most of us don't experience things to that intensity level here in America. However, many of us despair of life because of emotional turmoil or the ways just that we've reacted to the trials and the problems that we're facing. And so whether the threat is real, 100% real, or whether it is somewhat imagined, our response to it should be the same. Here, the Psalms are the prayer journal of the Bible. And I think this is why we resonate so much with it. Many of us have felt this. Maybe you've even felt it this last week. Your soul cleaves to the dust. You're clinging to the dust, to the ground. Then his response is this: "Revive me, renew my life according to your word." So the hope here is for the child of God to move in the direction of holiness, to move in the direction of looking to God for the help, for the deliverance from the trial that has you so worn out, so exhausted even by what's going on. Revive me, renew my life in accordance with your word. I have told of my ways, and you've answered me. So I've prayed to you about what is so hard, what has me so distraught. I've brought those petitions, those anxieties, and I laid them at your feet, and you answered me. Teach me your statutes, is his response. He doesn't just cry out to God, he's also looking to God for the answer, and he's not looking for that in some kind of inner light. I've heard people talking more and more about how you look within. Now that you're a born-again Christian, you look within for the answers because he put a new heart within you. I still don't understand the logic with that whole thing, because my hope is in the Lord, and that is outside of me in the Word. I don't have inerrant wisdom within my own brain because I'm a new Christian. My mind is still corrupted by sin, and I still need it renewed and washed over and changed by the Word. I have an inclination now toward it with that new heart. I now have a desire toward knowing what God says and obeying it. But I still need the Word to inform. He says further, not only have I told you about my ways, not only have I poured out my heart to you and that you've answered me, he says in verse 27, "Make me understand the way of your precepts, so I will meditate on your wonders." What we have going on here in these two verses is he's wanting an increase in knowledge, an increase in wisdom, and for the purpose that there will be an increase in devotion. Notice what he says there, "so that I will meditate." I want to understand these things, and then I will meditate on your wonders. So there's this, not just a desire to know more stuff, but a desire to be more devoted. Isn't that what we want? We don't want to just stay as this thing that we are. We want to be more and more conformed to the image of Christ. In verse 28, my soul, he swings back to this life-threatening condition. So as with all of us, the trial goes up and down and up and down, and we come back to it. He says, my soul weeps because of grief. This is such a strong expression here. What he's talking about here is that he feels like his life is falling apart with grief. I don't think these are situations that I've experienced in life that I care to even bring up in a forum like this. There are those times, though, in life where you feel like you're just utterly falling apart because of grief, because you're so worried about those you love, because you want to see them walk in truth, because you see that they're heading in terrible directions, or you see the tightening of the noose around the neck of the church, even in America, and things like that, and you start to feel all of this, and we can connect with this thought that my soul weeps because of grief. This is a deep inward grief that cannot seem to be shaken. And here is again the hope, the response. Strengthen me. Reestablish me according to your word. You see that he's returning back to looking to God for what God has said he will do, according to his word, as he said back in verse 25. Verse 29 now he says, remove the false way from me and graciously grant me your law. Remove the false way from me. He wants everything that is fake, false, pointless to be removed from his life. Now that's a dangerous prayer because I have a lot of fake and phony things, I'm sure, in my life, and the only way that gets removed is through trial, which takes me back to the beginning of this. Maybe God has you in the trial that you're in for the purpose of answering even this prayer that you've uttered. Remove the phony stuff from my life. The things that don't really matter, just melt it away. That's a dangerous prayer. Of course, it is exactly the kind of prayer the Lord wants to answer in our lives as it moves us into the direction of being closer to his heart. But remove every false way from me and graciously grant me your law. So how is it that God's going to remove the false ways from it? Well, he's going to do it with trials, but trials in and of themselves don't really remove the dross. You need the Spirit and you need the Word of God that is going to be challenging your silly ways of thinking, your worldly ways of thinking. The Word of God challenges all of that. And without this being ingested, then I respond to trials just as the world would. But that's exactly the opposite of what I want. I don't want to respond to the problems of life just as the world does. Where's the glory in that? That's not at all what we want. Instead, we want to see the worldliness, the pointlessness in our ways, and to have that removed from us. He then further says, verse 30, I have chosen the faithful way. I have placed your ordinances before me. I cling to your testimonies, O Lord, and do not put me to shame. I shall run in the way of your commandments, for you will enlarge my heart. So what we have here now is this active involvement that the psalmist has in his obedience to God. He doesn't let go and let God here in that regard. Instead, what he does is he says, now that I've prayed this out, now that we've talked about this, here is what I'm going to do. He takes an active role in obeying God, in pursuing holiness. There's no passivity here. There's no getting in the back seat. Instead, we find an energetic pursuit of obedience. I have chosen the faithful way. The faithful way here would be indicative of a life that is characterized by obedience. That's the direction I'm going, that I've headed, that I've set my feet to. I've chosen that. And I have placed your ordinances before me. This clarifies the first part of verse 30. He says, I've chosen this way. How do you know that you or I have done likewise and chosen the faithful way? Because I'm taking in the Word. There's no way to walk in obedience without knowing the Word. I cling to your testimonies. Notice this is the contrast of verse 25. In verse 25, his soul was clinging to the dust. And now he's saying, I cling to your testimonies. See the resolve that comes about as one walks with God? As one goes into the Word, I approach it in the first place, maybe feeble and frail and afraid and despondent and feeling like my life clings to the dust, that it's barely hanging on. And then as I come into the Word, as I meditate on the Word and pray to the Lord, there comes this resolve as the Spirit works in and through me as I go through the Word. I cling to your testimonies, O Lord. Do not put me to shame. Don't leave me in the condition that I was in verse 25. Don't leave me there. There's no way that I can glorify you as I stay there. Verse 32. I shall run the way of your commandments. Here what we find is the strongest expression of his eagerness to obey. He doesn't just want to kind of go through the motions. He wants to eagerly obey. How's he going to do that? For you will enlarge my heart. Without the Lord doing that part, I'm not going to be running anywhere except towards sin. Here we have a man who we can connect with, who is having he's not just bored with life, he's despairing of life. He's struggling with these realities that of the things that are going on, just like we do. And then we follow him through this trail. And we go with him as he works out his salvation with fear and trembling. May we do the same. Hope this has been encouraging for you, and this has been a fruitful time in the Word. See you next time.